Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching A Plus Essentials, Safety and Environmental Issues. This is part of Train Signal Fast Track CBT Video, CompTIA A Plus. In this video, our overall goal is to provide you, the viewer, a fundamental knowledge of computer safety and environmental issues. To do this, we're going to talk about the basics of computer safety and environmental issues. We'll learn about protecting the environment, talk about cleaning computers safely, how to repair computers safely, talk about types of accidents that can happen when working on computers and how to avoid them. We'll learn about electrostatic discharge, or ESD, and then how to create a safe working environment. But first, let's talk about the A+ exam objectives that are covered in this video. We're going to cover Objective 7.1 of the A+ Essentials domain, covering safety and environmental issues. The first objective says to describe the aspects and importance of safety and environmental issues, specifically identify the potential safety hazards and take preventative action. Use material safety data sheets, or the MSDS, or equivalent documentation and appropriate equipment documentation. Use the appropriate repair tools, and describe methods to handle environmental and human accidents, including incident reporting. Objective 7.2 says we should be able to identify potential hazards and implement proper safety procedures, including ESD precautions and procedures, safe working environment and equipment handling procedures. Objective 7.3 says we should be able to identify proper disposal procedures for batteries, display devices, and chemical solvents and cans. So, of the A+ Essentials, these are the objectives under domain number 7, Safety and Environmental Issues. Now, I want to point out that in this video we're covering the safety and environmental issues for both the A+ Essentials and the A+ Technicians exam. These topics won't be brought up later in this video series. In other words, there won't be a specific video later in the technician part of our video series covering safety and environmental issues. In this video, you'll learn all you need to know concerning safety and environmental issues for both the Essentials exam and the Technician exam. So now that we know what we need to find out of this video in order to pass the A+ certification exams, let's move on. So first, let's start off by talking about the basics of computer safety and environmental issues. Now, you might not think about it, but working on any kind of electronics can be dangerous. Yes, even death is possible. Now, additionally, it's important to know how to deal with electronics properly to protect our environment. So keep yourself safe first, but it's also very important to protect the environment that we live in. Now, here are some computer safety hazards that we need to talk about. First off, computer components. Now, electric shock can kill you. So if you touch bare wires, say from a power supply, and that power supply is plugged into the wall and it has electricity going through it, the shock from that electricity could potentially kill you. That's important to note. You know, working on computers can be fun, but it's not so fun if you get shocked. Now, always make sure that the power is off. And it doesn't have to be unplugged, but in my case, in my personal experience, I always unplug it just to be 100% sure. So always make sure that power cord is pulled out of the back of the power supply, the back of the monitor, printer, whatever it is that you're taking apart. Make sure that it's unplugged. Having it off is great, but unplugging it is even better. Now, the exception to that is hot swappable parts. There are some hot swappable parts, such as hot swappable disk drives and hot swappable power supplies in servers that don't have to be, the power to the server does not have to be disconnected for those hot swappable parts to be taken in and out of their respective drive bays or power supply bays. They're designed so that the server never has to come down. You don't have to shut down Windows. You can just pull that power supply out and replace it with a new one when the original power supply goes bad. So those are computer component safety hazards you should be aware of. Second off, I want to talk specifically about the computer power supply. Now, when working on computers, of special concern is the computer's power supply. The best thing you can do is just replace a suspected power supply that may be broken. So you think the power supply is broken, the fan isn't turning, it won't turn on, it's plugged into a known good wall outlet. What do? Replace that power supply. Taking it apart for the cost of that power supply and trying to fix it yourself just isn't worth it. It isn't worth the risk. It isn't worth the time. Power supplies have gotten down to be very inexpensive, $40 or less, and just going and replacing it with a brand new power supply is the best thing you can do for your safety, for your money, and also for your time. Now compare the cost of the power supply versus the cost and pain of getting electrocuted. Certainly, nobody wants to get shocked or electrocuted, so it's just not worth it. Now, power supplies can have capacitors that can hold lethal charges even after the power supply is disconnected from electricity. Now, to those of us who aren't electricians and don't understand really what capacitors do, this sounds hard to believe, right? You know, it's hard to believe that anything could still shock you if it's not plugged into the wall. Well, with capacitors, they hold that electricity in them, and so think of those capacitors almost as a battery. They're storing power, and even with the device unplugged from the wall, if you stick your hand in there, you could get shocked from those capacitors, and that electric shock could hurt you. Well, it will hurt you, but it could even kill you. So just some more reasons that when you think a power supply is bad, just replace it. Now let's talk about some more basics of computer safety and environmental issues. First off, let's hit on printers. You should never turn toner cartridges for laser printers upside down. The toner can spill out all over you, all over the floor, and can create a hazardous toner dust cloud that I'm sure will certainly annoy the other people in the office. So don't turn that toner upside down. That toner is very difficult to get out of your clothes and out of the carpet. Don't put anything in the printer while it's running. Usually printers, as soon as you open them up, they'll stop whatever they're doing. They'll stop their mechanical movements. This goes for copiers as well. But some printers, there might be some way you could stick your finger or a pencil inside the printer while it's moving. You never want to do this. You can hurt yourself or you can damage the printer. Don't look at the source of the laser on the laser printer. This can damage your eyes. Don't touch sensitive parts of a laser printer or you'll damage those parts, such as the developer on a laser printer. There's a plastic piece that you can slide away and you could stick your finger in there and touch the developer. You don't want to do that. Laser printers and copiers can get very hot inside. Be very careful. Usually the hot pieces are painted yellow or red. Many times they have sort of a fuzzy looking paint on them. You don't want to touch those parts because you can burn your fingers or your arms. They can get very hot. Always call a certified printer technician to repair a printer once you go past the basic troubleshooting skills. I mean, does the printer have paper? Does it have ink? Does it have toner? Have you restarted the printer? Have you cleared the jams? You know, once you get past some of those things, I highly recommend calling a certified printer technician to find out what's going on. Next up is monitors. Don't try to repair CRT monitors. CRT monitors are the cathode ray tubes. Those are the big TV set looking monitors, not the new LCD monitors. CRT monitors contain lethal power levels even for some time after they're turned off. You know, to many of us, this goes against reason. You know, when you unplug something, to most people, all the power in that thing is gone. There's no more power source, and you could take it apart as much as you want without causing any harm to yourself. Well, this isn't the case for CRT monitors. They can contain lethal power levels even for some time after you turn them off. So you don't want to go in and start taking apart a CRT monitor. I highly recommend calling a certified technician to repair a monitor. If you call a technician, what they're going to do to prevent from hurting themselves is that they'll discharge the high voltage with a high voltage probe. That's what the certified technician is going to do before he starts taking that monitor apart. I highly recommend that you replace any old CRT monitors with LCD monitors. They take up much less space, they cost less than your CRT monitor did originally, and you might even get more viewable space on your monitor. LCD monitors are a great replacement for any CRT monitor. Never break the glass on a CRT monitor. It can be very harmful. You can get some very harmful gas if you were to break the glass, besides the glass just being dangerous. Now, do not use an ESD strap or electrostatic discharge strap when you're working on a monitor. That can actually channel that electrical surge from the monitor into your body. And I'm going to talk more about ESD straps here in a little bit. Generally, whenever you're working on any electronics, you use an ESD strap, but that's not the case when working on CRT monitors. All right, let's move on. All right, we have some more basics of computer safety and environmental issues. First up, we have the keyboard. Now, the most common keyboard issue is a spilled drink on the keyboard. If this is a soda, a syrupy drink, that syrupy drink most likely is going to ruin the keyboard and it's never going to work again. There's no point even in trying to clean it or repair it in any way. Keyboards today cost between $5 and $50, and usually when you spill a syrupy drink on there, it's easiest to just recycle that keyboard and replace it with a new one. Now, spilling water or any kind of liquid on the keyboard cannot hurt you. You're not going to get shocked like sometimes you see on TV, but you will have to replace that keyboard. I see sometimes people's letters wear off. This is something else that can happen to keyboards, and I'll see them put tape or they'll write on there with a magic marker what the letter was. Again, easiest, just replace that keyboard. Next up is the environment that you have your computers in. Keep computers away from direct sunlight. That direct sunlight can cause them to overheat in time, and components will go bad, like the motherboard or the fan, processor or RAM. All those things will go bad if they get too hot. Keep liquids away from PCs. Electricity and liquids don't mix. Servers must remain cool. If you're working in a data center or even just a desktop server or a server that sits underneath your desk, those servers need a lot of ventilation. They have a lot of fans and they generate a lot of heat. I've seen data centers where the temperature went up to 100 degrees in there for just an hour, and after that, the motherboards on 25 servers went bad over a period of a month. So that heat it's really dangerous what it can do to computers and servers alike. So make sure that your computers have a lot of ventilation. Then there's safety in the work environment. You need to make sure that accidents don't happen, in your work environment. You want to prevent those accidents any way you can. One way to prevent someone tripping over cables is a floor cable guard. This is like a rubber strip that goes on the floor. It covers up your cables, and it usually sticks to the floor with some kind of double stick tape. In a pinch, you can take packing tape or duct tape, and you can tape those cables to the floor to prevent someone from tripping over them. Two things that are bad for computers are either low humidity or high humidity. If you have low humidity, you'll get static electricity, which will cause electrostatic discharge and the shorting out of computer components. If you have high humidity, you'll get too much moisture and condensation, and then you'll get water vapor in the room. Both of these are bad. You want to maintain the humidity of a room with computers in it right around 50%. Then there's high voltage areas. Behind UPS battery backup systems and in server rooms, those high voltage servers and UPSs can generate a lot of electricity. And getting shocked with, say, a 208 volt computer cable, if it happens in a certain way, can be lethal. So you definitely don't want to get shocked with any sort of high voltage. You want to take special care to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. So when it comes to protecting the environment, it's important to know that the improper disposal of electronics results in landfills being filled with lead. This is harmful lead that pollutes the environment. So if you just take your PC and you set it out on the curb for the trash man to pick up, just sending that PC to the local landfill pollutes that landfill. So that's not a good thing to do. Also, monitors contain phosphorus, mercury, and lead. Computer batteries may contain lead, and toner and ink cartridges are harmful to your health. Unfortunately, today, computers are considered disposable. So just like a disposable razor or a paper towel, when people buy a new computer at their local electronics store, many times they take their old computer and just throw it in the trash can. This is very bad for the environment. So why not recycle that computer equipment? Here are some of the things that you can do. First off, you can check with the manufacturer or the company that you bought your new computer from. So, for example, I know that Dell has a strong recycling program when it comes to computers and electronics. So if you buy your new computer from, let's say, Dell, you can take your old computer and you can send it back to them. There's a procedure for that. You don't want to just ship it back to them. You need to follow their procedure, but they do have a program in place that can help you recycle that old computer. And I know many of the other computer companies have this as well. I'm just using them as an example. You can also check with your local government. I know a local city in my area has a computer electronics recycling day at one of their local pickup stations. So on the first Wednesday of the month, you can bring your computers in, you drop them off, and the city takes care of recycling those electronics properly so that they don't pollute the environment. You can reuse old parts. So, why buy a new computer that has a CD-ROM drive if your old CD-ROM drive was working fine? Why not take out the old CD-ROM drive and use it in the new computer? Many of these things are the same. They're just new. It's the exact same thing. Maybe sometimes it's a little bit faster or whatever. But, if the old one was working fine for you and speed wasn't a problem, why throw out that old CD-ROM drive? You can contact the EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, and ask them about computer recycling programs. You can donate your old equipment to a charity so that it continues to get used, and you also get a tax write-off for it. You can look on the internet. There's many companies on the internet that do computer recycling. Even small electronics like cell phones and iPods, laptops, they'll recycle all of those different things. Many times they'll even pay you to send them your old electronics, whether they're working or not. So it can be a win-win situation both for the environment and for you. And then finally, you can reference a material safety data sheet, an MSDS. This is a document that tells us the toxicity of a product and how it must be disposed of. And I've got an example of this at the end of the video. I'm going to talk more in depth about material safety data sheets. Now let's talk about cleaning computers. Computers, just like other electronics and even mechanical devices, need to be cleaned periodically so that they'll function properly for the long term. Here's an example of a computer power supply, and you can see inside the fan here, you can see the dust that's caked on these fan blades. Well, the most obvious and easiest solution to get rid of this dust and dirt that's caked in this fan's power supply so that it will operate properly is to use this can of compressed air, or they call it canned air. What you do is you buy this can here. This one happens to be called Dust Off. There's many different brands of this canned air. You take this plastic tube and you put it on the front and you spray inside the power supply. It sprays air out at high velocity and it blows the dust off of the fan blades. It's not enough to, try to use a paper towel or a Q-tip or a fan, or even, just blowing with your mouth. It's not enough. It's not equivalent to what this canned air can do. This canned air is great to clean out, things like this, fans, inside the case, the motherboard, everything like that. Many times people will use vacuums to try to, suck the dust off of whatever's dirty, but many times they just don't have enough power to take that dust off. Many times the canned air is about the best solution that you can find. So this canned air is great for cleaning all types of electronics, printers, you know, TVs, DVD players, just about anything you take apart that needs cleaning. This canned air is good for that. So that's just one example of cleaning computers. Here are some more computer cleaning products. Here's a spray can, and it's used to get rid of static. So, you know, your monitor, if you touch it, you might get shocked with static. You know you've got some static on there. Even your desktop or, you know, the top of your computer case, especially in the winter when the heater runs, the air gets very dry and static tends to build up very quickly because it's very low humidity in the room with the computer. So this static guard here is some spray you spray in the room to get rid of static. Just an example of safety, you know, preventing problems with your electronics, and also proper, you know, maintenance of computer systems. Here's some notebook screen cleaners here. These are wipes that you take out, and they're specifically designed to clean notebook LCD screens. So these are just some more examples of computer cleaning products. So dust or dirt can prevent computers from functioning or cause them to fail completely. I've seen computers come back from, say, lumber yards or factories, places that get very dirty. And I've seen the fans just caked up to the point that they can't even move. And you open the computer case, and inside, I kid you not, there are dust bunnies 3 inches tall and 3 inches wide. You know, larger than what you can fit in your hand. You're pulling it out. Much like you do when you clean out the, you know, the fluff catcher on your dryer. It's amazing the amount of dust and dirt that these computers can collect. So proper cleaning is very important for the proper functioning of computers and other electronic devices. Do not use solvent-based cleaners on monitors or LCD screens because they can cause discoloration. So you don't want to take some sort of cleaner like acetone and try to clean your monitor screen. You're just going to ruin your monitor screen when you do that. The proper way to clean LCD and CRT screens is to use a mildly damp cloth and clean the computer case, the mice, the keyboards, printer cases, and of course the monitors. The monitors are the place that you'll see the dirt and dust build up the most because you're staring at the monitor. But if you see it on the monitor, you know it's everywhere else in the room, on all the electronics, and even inside the electronics. Now, if you do spill something on a keyboard, you can attempt to clean it with demineralized water and then dry it off. However, many times if it's a substance like a soda that has a lot of syrup in there, you're not going to be able to get it off, and you might as well just replace that keyboard and recycle the old keyboard. Now, electronic components should never be exposed to water. Instead, denatured isopropyl alcohol should be used. This is commonly called electronics cleaner. And never use a pencil eraser. A lot of times people will say, oh, just use a pencil eraser to clean off, say, the gold tips of the memory. That doesn't really work. Don't do that. And like I said earlier, compressed air is the best way to clean dust out of computers and components. Vacuum cleaners are not recommended as they can cause electrostatic discharge, but there are some anti-static vacuums available if you really do want to use a vacuum cleaner. So now let's move on to safety documentation. Each piece of electronics comes with a safety document. I suggest reading this instead of throwing away. That's what most people do with the safety documents, of course, that come with the computer or the monitor or the printer. Immediately they're tossed into the trash can. Well, a great new idea is look at that piece of safety documentation and see what it takes to use that device in a safe way. That safety documentation was written for a purpose, and in all reality, it could save you a lot of trouble. It could save your end user a lot of trouble as well by keeping you both safe and not misusing the devices that you intend to use for good purposes. And then a material safety data sheet, which I'm going to show you in a second, can also be referenced to learn about the health risk concerning this new piece of potentially hazardous electronics or consumable device. Now let's talk about repairing computers. Here on the left we have a computer toolkit. And what makes this different from a regular toolkit that you might buy at your local discount store is that the tools in here are specifically designed to work on computers. Here you see there are two nut drivers here. Here's one and here's another one. This is a Torx screwdriver, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a second, but it has a specific end that is used on many computers. Here's here's a device that you stick down in a small area, and when you push this button here, out of the end comes out three prongs, and they're used to pick up screws, let's say, that you couldn't pick up with your fingers. In the middle here we have a anti-static strap, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but this is something you wear to protect your computer from getting shocked with a static discharge when you're working on the computer. Here's a chip puller. This is used for chips to pull those out of the computer. Many times with today's electronics, you're not going to use this type of chip puller, but it is there should you need it. It might be used even today for like pulling out EEPROMs or other chips that you can hook these hooks on underneath and pull up. Here's the standard Phillips screwdriver, a small flathead screwdriver, and then a larger Phillips and a larger flathead. And you can buy much more complex computer toolkits with many more specific computer tools. This is just a good basic computer toolkit. And this might even be found at a local electronics store for say $10. So it's a great investment for anyone who's going to be opening up a computer anytime in the future. Here we have a multimeter. This is a device that's used to measure electrical currents. And this is a much more complex or higher end tool than most of us use when we work on computers. It's more for an electronics technician who wants to really troubleshoot the wiring or the components of a computer. But it's important to know what it is. So this is a multimeter, keep that in mind, and it's used to measure voltage and amperage of electrical components and wires. Here's another computer toolkit here with some different screwdrivers, including a Torx screwdriver, and here's a pair of tweezers. That's many times an important piece of a computer toolkit. Here's a soldering iron. This is used again by a more advanced technician who wants to solder wires together and replace some piece of electronics that isn't just a plug in and plug out piece of electronics. Soldering irons are used to take solder that you hold at the end of the tip, and it melts it and it creates liquid metal to bond wires together without simply, say, taping them or putting them in some electronics device that clamps them together. So that's a soldering iron, and it's a part of many more advanced computer toolkits. So when it comes to repairing computers, it's important to have a computer toolkit. Even a basic computer toolkit is very helpful and many times necessary. Screwdrivers are very important. Don't use magnetic screwdrivers. They can mess up computer chips. You might need specialized screwdrivers like Torx screwdrivers. Here's an example of the end of a Torx screwdriver. That's a common Torx screwdriver, but there's many specialized security Torx screwdrivers where the bits look completely different. So it may be important to have a full set of Torx screwdrivers to work on a computer. Here appears an example of a Torx screwdriver. You can see at the end of it, it's a round bit with these prongs sticking out here. And it works much better than a flathead or a Phillips head because it has a lot more gripping ability. So Torx screwdrivers are very nice, and they're commonly used on compact/HP computers. They're also many times used on Apple Macintosh systems. It's great to have a pair of pliers, wire cutters. Here's a pair of wire cutters right over here to clip wires or cut through zip ties maybe that are tying up cabling. A pair of wire strippers. These strippers will take off the plastic coating of wires so you can bond those wires together. This is a pair of wire strippers down here. A mirror, a small mirror that can be used to look into places that you normally can't see. A small flashlight. We talked about compressed air. We talked about tweezers to pick up small things like screws. And then optional for the more advanced technician, maybe a multimeter and a soldering iron. And then last, I want to mention an anti-static wrist wrap. It's very important to have an anti-static wrist wrap when you're working on computers. This prevents electrostatic discharge, basically static damaging the electronic components inside the computer. I'm going to show you one of these and talk more about these in just a couple slides. So now let's move on to our next slide. And let's talk about accidents. It's important to know what type of accidents could occur and also what to do to prevent that accident from causing damage to your electronics equipment. The first one is lightning. Of course, you can't prevent lightning from happening, but you can try to prevent the damage that lightning causes to your electronics equipment. For example, you can put on a surge suppressor, or you could put on an uninterruptible power supply, a battery backup, to all your electronics equipment to try to prevent damage from the lightning to your electronics equipment. These surges or power power spikes from lightning, even if it doesn't directly hit your home or your office, can cause damage to electronics equipment. So surge suppressors and UPSs, of course, if you can somehow disconnect all your equipment from the power outlets before the lightning strikes, that can prevent damage as well. And that's even a better way than a surge suppressor or UPS, but it's not always possible to disconnect electronics prior to a lightning strike happening. Next one is flooding. Yeah, of course, you can't prevent flooding, but when it comes to damaging your electronics equipment, you want to move that equipment out of the flooding area, um, and do whatever you can to keep your electronics from getting wet. The next one is fire. If you have a fire, if it's with electronics equipment, there are specialized smoke detection systems that can detect fire before it even has a flame. Those are used in higher end data centers. There's special fire suppression systems for data centers that can put out the fire without making a mess in the room or damaging the electronics equipment. There's dry powder smoke, or I'm sorry, dry powder fire extinguishers that can put out fires without using water. So just some examples of what to do if you have a fire and to try to prevent fires caused by, say, over utilized electrical circuits. You need to monitor how many amps your electronics equipment is pulling, and don't overutilize electrical circuits. What I mean by that is people who hook up one power strip to another power strip to another power strip and have 50 amps being pulled off of a 15 amp electrical circuit. If the breaker doesn't pop, that can cause a fire eventually. You also want to prevent too much heat. Say having a piece of equipment laying on the carpet that has fans on it. Those fans over time will wear out and the electronics can overheat and potentially cause a fire. So just some things you could do to try to prevent the fire from happening in the first place. The next one is a power outage. You can have a power outage completely, or you can have what they call a brownout, which is a low power voltage. You can even have a high power voltage spike. So all these things are best prevented from damaging your electrical equipment with a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. It's also a battery backup, so if the power goes out, it supplies power during the time the power's out, either a brownout or a blackout. And it's also a line monitor and a device that conditions the electrical signal so that it doesn't damage your sensitive computer equipment. And then, of course, there's human accidents, people tripping, people falling, hitting their head. We're going to talk a little bit more about safety when we talk about OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration. So now let's move on. I'm going to scroll down here, and our next topic is ESD, or electrostatic discharge. Electrostatic discharge can cause strange problems. ESD is basically the electricity that's carried, say, on your hand or on your body. It's generated, for example, when you walk across carpet. The movement of your feet builds up electricity on your body. then you go and you touch something that's metal where that electricity can discharge, and it causes a spark or a shock to that piece of electrical equipment. So why this is important when it comes to electronics is, say you're working on a PC, you have it open, you turn around, you walk across the room to get your screwdriver, you walk back, and when you touch that piece of electronics, the spark or shock from your hand goes into the electronics and can damage that piece of electronics. And this can happen without you ever feeling it or knowing it. Just after you hook the computer back up, you turn it on, and it doesn't work anymore. Well, what happened to it? Well, it got hit with ESD. So how can you prevent ESD? We're going to talk about that, but basically, to summarize ESD, it happens when two components with different electrical charges come in contact. CPU and RAM chips are especially sensitive to this. And when you touch someone, say you shake a hand after you've both walked across the carpet, you touch someone and there's a little shock, that's an example of an ESD. You can generate 20,000 volts by dragging your feet on the carpet. Pretty amazing. Components can be damaged with as little as 100 volts, so you can see how damaging this can be. Now, anti-static wrist wraps are an excellent solution, and it attaches to the ground and to your wrist. You can use anti-static bags for electronic parts. There's ESD mats, anti-static mats that you can stand on that will also help discharge that electricity. Now, a great way to prevent this is to keep humidity at about 50%, and you can also use anti-static spray. You can buy anti-static spray. See, I believe I have a picture of anti-static spray. One of these slides. Here it is. This anti-static spray right here, Stat Clean, is just one of the many different anti-static sprays you can buy to spray in a room or spray on components to prevent static from occurring. If you don't have anti-static spray, you can mix Downy fabric softener with water, about half and half, put it in a spray bottle and spray it around the room, and that will reduce the static in the room. So some great ways to prevent ESD. Let's look at what an anti-static wrist wrap looks like. This is an anti-static wrist wrap. You can see this right here goes around your wrist. You wear it on your wrist. This connects to it, so you can disconnect the strap if you need to and walk around with just this wrist strap on. When you come back to your workbench where you're working on your PC, you reconnect this, and this clip here, this alligator clip, stays connected to something metal where you can discharge the electricity that might have built up in your body. So you don't want to hook this to your electronics component. Maybe you want to hook it to the metal frame of your desk or something that's not going to be damaged by the electrostatic discharge coming off of this alligator clip. These are very inexpensive and great ways for technicians to prevent ESD from damaging sensitive electrical equipment. Now let's talk about creating a safe working environment. OSHA is a government agency called the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Now their main job is to enforce the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Their website is here at osha.gov, and in fact they have a special area on computer workstations located at this web link. Primarily it focuses on ergonomics, not hurting your back or neck or hands while you're using computer workstations. But they have a number of different things that focus on computers and electrical equipment. Now, what are the obligations for your company when it comes to OSHA? Well, it's the obligation of the company and the employees to identify any safety hazards in the environment. The company is obligated to take preventative measures to address each of those hazards, and then the employees are given the obligation to understand how to respond to accidents. This is what OSHA expects of companies and the employees. Now, here are some specific company and employee responsibilities. First off, It's the responsibility of the company and employees to properly maintain equipment. And that's why in the A plus we talk about computer maintenance. Warning labels should be applied. An OSHA poster should be posted. A record of accidents or injuries should be kept. You should constantly monitor the work area to ensure OSHA compliance. Employees should understand OSHA notices, follow safety rules, use protective gear, report hazards to the company, and report uncorrected hazards to OSHA. So if you feel that you have a safety issue in your environment where you're working, you should report that to your company. Always make sure you wear the protective gear that the company has supplied and recommended. And if your company doesn't solve those safety hazards, then they should be reported to OSHA. So that's OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration. Now let's talk a little bit more about a safe working environment. To create a safe working environment, you need to have a safety plan. That plan looks at all the different possible hazards and accidents that could occur in your working environment and documents what you can do to prevent those, what your approach is on preventing them, how you test the procedures you're using to prevent those accidents, how you're going to investigate accidents when they do occur. It creates a system for employees to communicate concerns, such as a safety suggestion form. Perhaps they want to communicate their concerns anonymously so they don't seem like a whistleblower or a complainer. You want to have an accident reporting form so that when an accident occurs, someone documents exactly what happened in the accident, and that way you might be able to prevent the accident from happening the next time. You want to have an injury and illness log. Perhaps there's some chemical in the room that's making everyone ill or sick, and you want to create a log of illnesses so that you can document what's going on, and maybe you can identify what it is in the room that's causing people to get sick or to get injured. You want to have a safety inspection checklist. So when you create this plan, if you say, well, everyone in the room needs to wear safety glasses to prevent metal pieces from going into their eyes when they're working on the drill press, you want to periodically inspect to ensure that this is really being done. You should have a hazards removal form in your plan to know what to do with hazards in the room, how do you get rid of them and dispose of them properly. And that brings me to the Material Safety Data Sheet. That's this right here, the MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheet. And I'm going to show you what one of these looks like in just a second. But essentially, this is a document provided by the manufacturer of usually chemicals, but it could also be things like laptop batteries or computers that do contain hazardous chemicals. And the Material Safety Data Sheet tells you how to properly store this equipment or these chemicals and how to properly dispose of these equipment, pieces of equipment or chemicals. It also tells you the possible hazards that you might be affected by when working with these chemicals. So I'll show you what one of those looks like in just a second, but first let's talk about properly handling equipment. Now, some of the things you should know is that you should always lift with your legs, not with your back. So if you're going to pick up a large heavy laser printer, you should squat down, get underneath the laser printer, and then lift up by pushing with your legs. Don't bend over and pick it up with your back. This will prevent your back from getting injured. You can also wear a belt that will prevent your back from getting injured, or attempt to prevent your back from getting injured. Don't twist when lifting. Keep the objects close to your body when lifting. Don't hold them out. Always push instead of pulling. So if you're trying to move some heavy object, don't pull it, push it. Servers and large printers are heavy. Make sure you get 2 or more people to move one. Don't try to move it yourself. So these are just some tips that you should keep in mind to create a safe working environment. Make sure you have a plan and make sure you handle heavy equipment properly. Now let's take a look at that Material Safety Data Sheet. This is an example of a material safety data sheet. This is for IBM ink, so like ink cartridges for an inkjet printer. And it shows you the date it was created, the product that this sheet is covering, who manufactured this product, IBM, their phone number, responsible parties, contractors, and then it tells you what's inside this product. So there's water, there's preservatives, black dye, oil, polymer, chelting agents, and surfactants. There's the health hazards data. This is what's important to you. What is the effect of being exposed to the product in this ink cartridge? Well, it says there's none known for the total product. And are there any carcinogens that would be very harmful to your health? No, it says there are not. If you get this product in your eyes, this ink, what should you do? You should flush with plenty of water for at least 15 minutes. If you get it on your skin, you should wash thoroughly with soap and water. If you ingest it, you should give water, but don't induce vomiting. Obtain medical attention in all cases. So it tells you what to do if this product, comes in contact with your skin, and how it can be harmful and what you should do. Then it talks about how to properly handle and dispose of this product. What do you do if you spill it? Well, you cover with absorbent material, collect mixture, place in a closed container for proper disposal. What to do? What about disposing of it in a trash can? It says you should dispose of it in accordance with local, state, and federal regulations. No special disposal requirements. So this tells you how to properly get rid of it. So in the case of this ink cartridge, there's really no special disposal requirements. But if this was a battery or, say, spray paint or another hazardous chemical, there may be special disposal requirements, and you don't want to just throw that chemical away in the trash can. It asked if this material or this ink cartridge will explode if it's exposed to fire. It tells you how to put out a fire that has this material or this ink cartridge in it. It goes on and talks about the chemical properties. Is it water soluble? What does it look like? Is it stable? If it was some hazardous chemical, it may not be very stable, and at certain heat it might explode. And that's it. That's the end of the material safety data sheet. So pretty much just about any chemical or electronics that contain chemicals, you can find a material safety data sheet for those chemicals or those electronics out on the internet. And to create a safe working environment, you really need to know what you're working with. If you're working with some solvent every day, you should know, is that solvent flammable? Is it going to catch on fire if I set it next to the space heater? All things you should know. Can I take out the batteries from this UPS and throw them in the trash? Probably not. The material safety data sheet would tell you that. So just some examples of how a material safety data sheet can help you and how it's important to create a safe working environment. And with that, we've reached the end of our video covering computer safety and environmental issues. In this video, we learned about the basics of computer safety and environmental issues. We learned how to protect the environment, how to clean and repair computers safely, the different tools and cleaning components you might use to clean your computer or repair it. We learned about accidents, how to prevent those accidents, and what to do if accidents occur. We learned about how important it is to have a safety plan. We learned about OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, and what you need to know about them. We learned about electrostatic discharge, or ESD, and an anti-static wrist strap that can be used to prevent ESD. We learned how to create a safe working environment and how to use material safety data sheets. And with that, we're at the end of our video covering the CompTIA A+ Essentials and Technician Skills, talking about computer safety and environmental issues. Thank you very much.